you would presume all this open capacity on the on the road lines, on the roadways. What happened is that open capacity immediately got sucked up from somewhere else.
So yeah, basically any investment in transit, and they say this a lot too, I know down in Austin where I am, even adding a lane of highway, it's gonna fill up as soon as you build it. So as far as being able to build ourselves out of congestion isn't, necessarily the situation with transit or sometimes with highway lanes too. So what we tend to say is that, what transit does for you, if it's in dedicated right-of-way, allows the rider to have a predictable trip, so it's congestion-proof, if you will. So that way, it's gonna take, if it takes you 20 minutes on that train or that bus rapid transit line, it's gonna take you 20 minutes tomorrow, 20 minutes if there's an accident, 20 minutes if there's bad weather, all of that.
20 minutes when it will take you 10 minutes on the highway in free flow. I mean, it doesn't.
As long as you're not sharing right away.
You gotta get it out of traffic.
Right.
Correct.
You gotta get it out of traffic. And these are priced that way.
Right.
Yes,
Okay.
these are. And, whereas, like you said, if you're in traffic and there's a bad accident, you can't predict what your timing's gonna be on your arrival. And so it does allow for that. It also helps, for special events, if it goes to special event places, like downtown, and you're trying to funnel a lot of people into an area in a short amount of time. It helps with that as well.
Brian, how difficult is it when you're doing all these road shows and talking to obviously stakeholders and not obviously to the public, as far down as we can get? How hard is it to get the kind of real information you want when you're giving these people a quantum leap in transit to try to digest, when they haven't really had transit at all, from the standpoint of what we're talking about? The real ability to commute back and forth from one place to the other. And I'll give you an example. A couple of years ago, the Chamber in Norman did a study. There's 40,000 plus people that leave Norman and come north every day to go to work. There's another 25,000 people that don't live in Norman that come into town to work. Now, you're not going to get all those people on the commuter trail, but I'm just saying the numbers are huge. If you could ever really get them convinced about the efficiency and the consistency of using transit, even a multimodal system.
Well, I think we talked about this last week in governance, is I've not found the perfect thing to say to somebody who says, well, why should I buy into transit if I'm never going to use it? That is a very difficult thing to sort of defend yourself against. There's all sorts of things that you could say in that situation. I mean, it does open up some capacity, but it's not something that they're necessarily going to perceive or feel. So,
And when they leave Norman to go north, they don't all come to Oklahoma City.
right.
A lot of them do, the majority of them do, but they go to Midwest City, they go to Edmond, they go east, west, whatever. But they're leaving town in any way, any kind of activity that gets them to where they want to go at the end
Right.
without poor changes.
Right.
To me, can be sold at some point in the future.
Right, and that, to me, I think is probably the biggest issue that we really need to think about overcoming is that last mile. Because these rail corridors aren't necessarily getting to their final destination, per se. I mean, even Chesapeake, how far away is it from the Chesapeake, I guess, yeah,
Oh, that's
It's not that far. But
it's not too bad.
No, it's
Yeah.
close.
But still, there's a walk time to get to your front door, to get to your desk. And, it's really difficult to get a handle or to develop a system that it gets to all that. That's why you build these things slowly. You try to pick off the ones that are gonna be the most efficient and you build it. You get some wins under your belt and you keep rolling forward. And I think that's the biggest thing, is trying to find, that project. I mean, maybe streetcars in downtown is that, but, finding an early win so that you can start developing momentum and actually have a physical entity within your region that shows the success, shows the benefits. They can see it, because that's usually what people need to have.
And I think a lot of times, if you can get that
initial investment. The people who don't even think they would ever use it, a lot of times they'll use it once, maybe for a special event, maybe they take it down to another game. And once they've ridden it that one time, that really changes their mindset about transit in general. And you end up seeing people who never thought they'd use it for work and are willing to switch. So getting that initial investment is important. It can really influence future ridership.
And then, they're seeing that in Austin. I mean, that system is growing. And then it had a rough start, I think, but it's growing, and they're having to put more service out there.
And that's a perfect example.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the examples where they wanted to basically try and do a really, really cost-effective approach, and it ended up hurting them a little bit in the beginning, because when they kind of rolled it out, like I said, they wanted to do a little bit cheaper service, if you will, and so they didn't put in enough service. They didn't, it didn't make people feel comfortable with the service right off, and so that was kind of one of the things they had to kind of get over that hump. Now it's very successful. Now they have standing room only during, the peak time frame, which the peak in Austin is more than 8 to 9 in the morning. It's like 7 to 11, and then picks up again in the afternoon. So it's one of those things where you got to think about, as you think about the system, you got to make sure that you're putting an investment in there that's going to work for people right from the beginning. Otherwise, you kind of have to do a little bit of catch up. So.
We all talk about the last mile issue, and as you've indicated, it needs to be examined further. Will you, because presumably that's maybe one of the biggest hurdles in attracting choice ridership, right?
Yes.
Do you generally, do you think about the impact that weather has on that? You're not from here, but we have interesting weather, right? We don't have Austin's weather, so 2 months a year you don't want to go outside, but 10 months a year, 9.5 maybe, that's why I went to law school, it's lovely. I don't think you can say the same thing about Oklahoma City, so I wonder if you'll have a weather adjusted kind of consideration for that, because 3 months a year it feels colder than anywhere on earth. 3 months a year it feels hotter than anywhere on earth, and the other 6 months it blows you away. Weather's not to be ignored, I think, when you're talking about the last mile and attracting those choice riders. And at least at the meetings that I've attended, that's not a subject that's come up, but I think it ought to.
Right.
It seems like from the work that was done before I was on this, that there was some information about that you almost build your last mile first, and then you put in the long stretch.
I mean, it varies. I mean, it really does depend on your service area. If there's some really good major destinations that are going to generate trips, then it's okay to do the longer first. I think we've talked it a number of times in this discussion where we know we need to add to the bus system.
Yeah.
We need a little bit more coverage with the bus system. We need some better headways so that it does match up to putting in this high capacity transit. And we've tried to work that into, I think we still have some work to do, but I think we tried to work that into this analysis, into the modeling. And it's just, the model doesn't really have anything to back itself up on the weather issue or on how transit actually works in Oklahoma City. I don't know that it's going to be a place of assistance in terms of trying to generate the benefits of transit and addressing that issue. I think a lot of times you address weather with your design.
Yep.
In future phases when you're going to put this in, you try to get your system based on how people are going to use it. So that a lot of that gets in there. You think about what your canopies are going to look like, and where your waiting areas are going to look like, and all that stuff.
It's not just a transit issue either, so
Yeah.
as you're planning for these transit investments, the cities and others need to be doing the planning on the other side to make these areas more walkable, to make it to where it is less of a you get off, it's a huge parking lot, and you have to walk a long distance to get to an office. If you do the in the sun or the winter, the snow or whatever.
Right.
So.
Well, I know there was a lot of thought on the part of some through the streetcar routing process to look at not just the local service in the short term, but to make sure that routing also maximize the ability to distribute within a block or two of most of your major employers throughout downtown. I think fortunately, it does a really good job at that, I think.
Yeah, and you know, it might be the penalty we have in the transfer to get to it, and there's a number of things that it didn't perform well in the model. And I really think that's more a product of the model than what would actually happen. So we have a little bit of a fight here to try to think about what we really what we think the performance is going to be. And another issue is we don't have a good idea of peak versus off-peak ridership. Like, I think, you know, the N1 here is priced out at, you know, basically a full line, you know, full rail line for the commuter rail only, with some sidings, with all-day service, 15-minute service, you know, to match up to the LRT option. And I think we could probably do, you know, 20 to 30-minute service just in the peak hour and do a couple of midday trips and still get most of that ridership, and only do sidings off of the NSF to
And
lower
have
the
a
capital
lot lower,
cost.
have a lot lower cost.
So we would be talking about a lot less than the 150 million in order to at least get it started. And you would design it without precluding the full build in such a way. So there's some jumping off points that aren't really part of it. And this analysis is really designed to look at what the system is going to do, you know, that build out. And you know, obviously we have some work to do on that. So let me it's not connected to that computer. We do have a number of what we'll call observations. We did call it observations on there at the slide. We think that these numbers are good enough to warrant some type of high capacity transit. And I think that's the takeaway here, that there's some decent ridership out there that we think we can build on. We're not, given the new current criteria and their new starts, we're not real enthused about getting federal participation. I mean, we really need to think about what they call minimal operable segments. You know, that, you know, some pieces of the network that we might be able to pull in some federal dollars for. We think LRT is a little bit overkill. One of the criterion, there's two criteria, is really kind of looking at sort of the right sizing of this transit system to the ridership. And light rail numbers just don't really add up in that respect. And I think we'll try to generate some more information about really what that looks like, because these different technologies sort of have a different ratio between the number of seats on the vehicle and the floor space in the vehicle designed for standing. And so they really represent quite different capacities. How many people can we fit on the train at one time, or fit on the bus? And so a lot of technology decision goes into how the current ridership is utilizing that capacity, and then how much capacity we have left over, the latent capacity in there. Because no matter what system you build, a transit system doesn't work unless we know there's space on the vehicle for the next person. It's got to have latent capacity in it, or people won't use it because they'll think it's full. That's as bad an issue as it's not going to be there on time, or, you know, any of those types of things. So you have to pay for, you know, and this is the same as a road. You know, it's not as bad as a mall where you're building a parking lot for the Christmas rush, but you have to build a road to match up to your peak requirements. And the same holds true for transit. So and that's really what goes into choosing that technology. And we think LRT is just going to be too expensive given the amount of ridership that we do
Yeah,
have.
it just won't get, you know, the benefits and the costs just don't seem to.
Right. We want to do some extra math and some extra modeling on the short trips. That caught us a little bit off guard. I mean, that may mean that there's more exchange, or more people would choose transit to do the Norman to Moore type of thing, or Edmond to, you know, North Oklahoma City. We need to really take a look at that. We do feel like there's a critical mass of jobs and residential and things in Oklahoma City that sort of warrant the sort of form the anchor for this system. You know, there's enough growth and, you know, exciting things that are going on in the city where transit's gonna serve that, can serve that pretty well, and it will, you know, transit will be well utilized. This next bullet on the analysis trend consistent with the ridership numbers, I think the point that we're gonna make there is that there's 8 or 9 criteria in the analysis that sort of speak to ridership. You know, the connectivity to the activity centers, just basic population and employment in the station areas. And those are all sort of proxies for ridership. And so our analysis has really kind of pointed towards the options that will address that address the highest ridership. So really what it means is, like, if we look at this analysis, if we just looked at ridership on these things, we get the same ranking of alternatives. And is there any more significance to that?
No, I just think we need to kind of think about that a little, because that then kind of leans a little bit more towards the existing population and not really thinking about that future potential growth side of things. So we need to think a little bit about leveling that out when we bring it to you for your work session. So you can kind of see it from a more futuristic perspective, if you will, and kind of thinking future forward on that side, not just thinking about what's in existence.
And we're obviously not ready to dismiss commuter rail simply because of its technical feasibility and it offers us an alignment that is just going to be easier to do. It's just a matter of really getting down and figuring out if there's enough trips there to really warrant it.
Doesn't it have a lot to do with how close it comes, not just to activity centers, but if you're including employment centers in that? Because there's, you know, the line lines up, of course, obviously good for downtown Oklahoma City, for the Health Sciences Center, for the state capitol, for Chesapeake. It's well within a mile or
Right.
less of all those
Right.
locations. So strategically placing the proper station with the right one, you know.
Yeah, the amenities and
5-minute
pedestrian facilities to
shuttle.
get to the
I mean,
and shuttles.
there's a lot of employment population that's right along that line, especially from Oklahoma City North, Edmond, and then in Norman too,
right.
Yeah.
and in West City. So if you take all that stuff into consideration, I'm just kind of surprised it was worse than I thought it would be when you line that up.
The converse to this bullet also is that these hybrid alignments, the N2s, one of the issues kind of working against technical feasibility is dealing with the BNSF on that corridor. They're not going to be enthused about putting a bus BRT on their corridor. So commuter rail makes it easier to deal with them from a you know, and that's a big selling point for commuter rail. So, and I think we already mentioned sort of some of these things that are specific to the North Corridor, that there are some hybrids out there, that last bullet, and that, you know, we've got some engineering issues to deal with to navigating I-44 and getting it to know, if we're not talking about N1.
Can I ask you a quick question, your model? On commuter rail, do you have, based on existing data, a spacing on stations, minimum spacings based on what's out there that you figure in order to calculate that? And if you do, I mean, one of the things I'd read and heard about was that the newer locomotives that are being manufactured by Motive Power, that their accelerations are considerably higher than, you know, 10 or 15 or 20 year ago commuter rail engines. And that Denver was able to space their stations closer on their commuter rail lines because the accelerations of those engines are a lot more, they've got a lot more torque and capacity to accelerate, not quite like an LRT vehicle, and that allows you to space your stations closer. And if you can, then the short trips, you're gonna pull more ridership into there. So is that, how do you?
Well, we put in, you know, we prescribed travel time.
Mhm.
And, you know, travel time is based on, you know, the number of stops there. We did not get down into the weeds in terms of determining how much, you know, what the acceleration, deceleration, how much that was gonna take.
I don't know if there's like a standard
I think
on commuter rail, they
Yeah,
have to
we
be this
averaged,
far apart.
I think we averaged like 30 miles an hour. including stops and dwell time.
And we do have less stations on the commuter rail than we do the others. I think it's 7, is that right? Compared to
Yeah,
like 12.
We're probably higher than the typical commuter rail.
That was where I'm
Yes.
getting at.
Um,
Yes.
And that was really more putting it in a level playing field with the LRTs and the BRTs. So if anything, we might look at probably, at maybe taking a couple out or, you know, strategically.
And those were based on, you know, what's in existence there and, you know, really trying to hit some of those areas where people want to go, if you will, and working with the work groups. We basically gave them maps and they kind of did circles of what they knew was important to have, as well as our analysis from looking at existing employment centers, especially along the commuter rail. It did do well for existing employment, because, you know, there is employment up and down that corridor, so,
And we did the same process with the public as well.
yeah.
And interestingly enough, in the North Corridor, I think there weren't, pretty much in all those situations, you know, where we identified stations made sense versus what the work group said versus what the public said, it was all pretty much in line. So, I mean, everyone pretty much recognized those stops as the important station areas.
Is there any precedent in any of the western cities that we're comparing to where the private sector picked up the last mile, like shuttles from work centers to, if there was just a commuter rail, to fill that
Dart has a
gap?
program where they'll split those.
Well, and that was the other
Oh, the
question.
shuttle.
We even do some of that in Edmond where we have.
Right, so yeah, there's examples of that, and those aren't really called out in the model. Maybe we think about putting some sort of site-specific shuttles. The model is a little bit clunky in terms of coding these networks in there, and so we really need to think about how we're handling this project with the tool that we have. I mean,
Right.
it's what we have, it's the best that we have, and, you know, FCA would make us use it. So, you know, we just gotta think about what challenges it's presenting us and work towards, you know, what we really think it is. And there are some off-model options that we could look at, and just see what they say in terms of ridership. So we're contemplating that. So we're just, you know, it's a lot to take in. I know it's a ton for you all, it's a lot for us too, in terms of really, okay, what did we do?
What does it say?
And, you know, so we're getting closer.
Yeah.
So you're gonna do have some questions? Any other questions about, we're gonna have some voting
Do a
here.
little polling, using the clickers that you have.
Yeah, one of the things we want to make sure, we obviously have a lot of kind of analysis that we need to pull from this to be able to give you some more answers in regards to some of your questions. Sorry, that thing's a little difficult to, there you go, we can move it over. But what we're wanting to know is that obviously we added in, you know, you've got your existing enhanced regional mobility goal, support economic development, shape growth goal, provide balanced and coordinated multimodal system goals. So those were all existing goals that you all had and that everyone felt was important. Now, we added in engineering constraints and environmental and social impact / benefits because at this stage where we actually have a line on a particular street or in a particular corridor, we can start to look at that. And it is important to understand those kind of technical feasibility pieces. So what we want to do is we want to look at weighting not only on the previous weighting that you gave to your 3 goals at the top there, but we want to look at weighting in what you feel is important, including engineering constraints and environmental and social benefits, okay? So having all 5 of those items in mind, what we're really wanting you to do is rank in order, most important first to the least important last in your own minds for considering transit. Yeah, feel free to come forward if you can't see it. I totally get that.
Nobody sits near the speakers anyway.
So
You don't want me to say because I don't see you all
if you can remember, enhanced regional mobility is really all about activity centers, environmental justice populations, that sort of thing. Support economic development, shape growth is existing population and employment densities as well as development potential. And then provide balanced, coordinated multimodal system is ridership, the actual connections that are made to highways, hike and bike, and then service characteristics. So in that one, what's an example of that one?
Reliability.
Thank you. So
And
reliability, is it in the,
travel
is
time.
it in its own right of way? Is it in dedicated right of way, that sort of thing? Engineering constraints, so that's really the technical feasibility of it. How easy is it to construct? Is there major issues with it?
Cost.
And cost is somewhat in there because the more technically challenged it is, the more you're going to spend trying to deal with it. Same with environmental and social impacts and benefits. Now, of course, there's the side of just understanding that, and then there's also the side of needing to mitigate for impacts to the environment or social. So that's also can be a cost issue as well. So those are your 5. Again, we want you to rank them so that we have a different way to weight the table, if you will. It'll just be one of the data points we bring to you. So again, like for example, if I feel engineering constraints the most important, I'm going to push 4 first. And then I'll push number 1 if I think enhanced regional mobility is the second most important, and so on and so forth for all 5. On your clickers, if you guys remember, you can kind of see the 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 on the buttons.
And if you think that you messed up, you can just do all 5 over again, and it'll only accept your last 5 button pushes.
You can write them down too if that helps.
Now,
Yep, go for it.
How many people do you have?
13.
13, okay, we're at 12.
Somebody step out.
Does everybody finish clicking?
only my first number showed up in this little box here. Did they get sent, do you know?
Go ahead and
Try
go
it
through and
again.
click them again.
Okay. Now, nothing.
Should it light up?
Is it lighting up for everyone? Yours is not lighting up? We can try a different,
There's another one right there.
New
Right on
clipboard.
it. There it
There we go.
is. So we have a defect.
So yours did come in.
First time
better.
verifying.
Okay.
Probably
Yeah,
need some.
yours did work on the other one that.
Oh, it did? Okay.
Yes, yes.
So we need some batteries maybe.
Okay. All right, so it looks like we still have enhanced regional mobility and support economic development kind of coming out towards the top, so that's good. You guys are consistent with what you've said in the past. And then it looks like engineering constraints have kind of floated to the top, if you will, as well. So, because you want to make sure that it's feasible, so that's good. We'll take that into account as well. Provide balanced and coordinated multimodal system, coming in at 18%, and then down at 9, the environmental and social. So we'll use these and provide you, again, a weighting that's associated with this as well. We'll ask these same questions of the work group and get their input too, so you kind of have a little bit of an understanding of specifically for the North Corridor, what they feel is important. And then we'll do the same for the East and the South corridors too, and bring that data back to you at the RTD work session that we have. Okay. All right, so then also at the work session, we're gonna have a lot to cover. Okay, so we're gonna have 3 corridors that we need to dig into. And with those 3 corridors, we're really gonna have to be looking at cost, both the capital and operation and maintenance cost, the ridership data, the technical detailed analysis that we started talking about today, the public and stakeholder feedback that we'll have at that point. We'll need to kind of tell you what we heard, if you will, and then also our recommendations. So as we're going through and we're hearing from the public and digging deeper into the detailed analysis, we're going to come back with our technical assessment as well and give you what we think. If we were kings for a day, what the locally preferred alternative would be in each corridor. So knowing that we have a lot to do on that day, we will cover all on the work session, but we just want an indication from you guys of what we should spend the most time on during that work session to help you. And so if you just give us your initial thoughts, you just pick 2, any order, doesn't matter. So just pick 2 that you feel we really need to focus in on. Again, cost, ridership, technical detailed analysis, public and stakeholder feedback, or team recommendations. We will cover all, but these are the 2 we'll spend the most time on. Okay, we got 10.
Rick left, so we're waiting on more.
There's 12.
There we go. That's good.
12. Do we have somebody leave?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay, so cost and ridership is what we really want to look at. Perfect. Okay, so we'll spend most of the time kind of going through that analysis. Obviously, we'll touch on all of them during the work session and make sure you get a nice balanced understanding of all the different elements. All right. And it sounded like 2 for the work session, that we wanted to try and understand a little bit more, talking a little bit about ridership, and I'll have to talk with Andrea over there offline, so I can't promise anything yet, but it sounded like we did want to kind of look at what are some of the, what we